Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Today, we are going to be discussing how to prepare for retirement as an SLB employee. I'm going to spend a little bit of time discussing who we are, who is Quotient Wealth Partners. Then we're going to move into the topic of today's discussion, which is going to be expressed through 5 key items to consider as you're planning for retirement as an SLB employee. Lastly, we're going to discuss our approach to retirement planning and what our planning process is with folks. And then, as I mentioned, we're gonna hold off for Q&A at the end if we're able to get to it. So, Quotient Wealth Partners, who are we? We are a independent wealth management firm. We've got offices nationally. So we've got our headquarters is in Dallas. We've got a Houston office, San Antonio, Denver, and New Jersey. Currently, our firm, we manage over $4.5 billion in assets with over 2,000 client households. Our firm, we are fully independent. We are an advisor-owned wealth management firm. So a little bit about our history and how we've gotten to this point today. So in 2023, we launched Quotient Wealth Partners, who is an independent firm, and leveraging the years of experience from our time in different situations to now integrate that into who we are today. So that includes, innovative investment solutions, innovative tax, estate strategies for our clients. Our firm, where we specialize in, is working with corporate employees. For myself, I work with many SLB folks here in the Houston area. Our Houston office, we specialize working with all of the major oil firms such as Chevron, Exxon, Shell, BP, SLB, you name it. So looking at this next slide, this is our services. And we are going to display that through our Wealth 360Q. So at the heart of what we do is going to be financial planning. What we want to do is create a comprehensive financial plan for all of our clients that is going to include the rest of what you see here on this wheel. So within the investment management section, we want to be able to create a unique, personally tailored investment solution and investment allocation for our clients that's based on your financial plan. What we believe is that your financial plan should dictate the investments that you need, not the other way around. So we've got some very creative and unique solutions that we can use for our clients, whether it's in the public markets, private markets, looking at ways to hedge risks for our clients' portfolios. But we're going to see what your financial plan needs at the end of the day, and we're going to use that to then show us, all right, what are the investments that we need? We offer tax preparation as well as tax strategies for our clients. So a lot of tax planning done in-house, and we find that a lot of our SLB clients, whether it's through their pension, 401k, if they have restricted stock units or old non-qualified stocks options, that there is a need for in-depth tax planning. Now, looking at retirement planning, we're going to take a look at your benefits and compensation. So what is your income, your salary? What is your bonus? Like I mentioned, are you getting any of these restricted stock units? What are ways to then optimize what you've got at SLB through the benefits that they offer, whether it's medical, retirement benefits, the incentive benefits that you may be receiving, and just figure out, how do we minimize your taxes? How do we maybe maximize how you're saving to your 401k? And just really just take a 10,000 foot view of what you've got going on. That leads us into healthcare and family support, right? So we want to make sure you're covered from the medical standpoint, especially as you're getting close to retirement. And I'll cover that more here in a little bit. But we also have a really unique solution that we've partnered with a company to allow us to go a little bit more intensive on what your medical and family support needs may be, especially as you're approaching retirement. Insurance and risk management, we're happy to do a insurance review, ensure that you're covered on all aspects from there. And then we do have insurance solutions as well if needed. I think we find that long-term care is a growing need for our clients, especially as they're aging. And then last part of this wheel that you see here, and we put it there purposefully, is estate planning and wealth transfer. That is really, tying the bow on your financial plan, is getting an understanding of what your estate planning goals are. What's your estate going to look like at the end of the day, and how do we want to leave these assets? Do you guys have a goal of leaving money to kids or to charities? So really what our integrated wealth management services are designed to do is get an understanding of who you are, get a feeling for what your goals are, what you guys are wanting to accomplish now and through retirement, and create a value proposition that says, hey, we can do all these items for you guys and help you accomplish your goals along the way. So as I mentioned, we are independent fiduciaries. So everything that we do, we have to put your best interest in mind. We work with Schwab and Fidelity as our third-party custodians. You would look at your statement and you would see Fidelity, and then you would also see Quotient Wealth Partners. That means you've got an independent firm utilizing a third-party custodian, knowing that you are getting the fiduciary standard and your best interest is being taken into account. So now moving into the topic of today's discussion is the 5 key considerations for SLB employees. The first key that we're going to be discussing today is understanding the retirement you want. Now, it may be simple in thought, but what we find is it's generally the hardest key for our clients is understanding the retirement you want, because it's generally the biggest mental battle when making that adjustment into retirement. So what we discuss with our clients is, let's look at this next chapter of our life. What is it going to look like? From a day-to-day perspective, what are the things that you want to do? Is it traveling? Do you have hobbies that you're going to be doing from day to day? Do you want to spend your time volunteering? Do you want to spend your time with family? The other aspect here is lifestyle aspirations. Like, what are the things you're going to be doing over the next 20, 30 years in terms of some of the goals that you have, right? Is the current home you're in, is that your retirement home? Or do you see yourselves downsizing and moving into your retirement home, whether it's in Texas or it's going to be closer to where your kids and grandkids are, right? So there's also legacy planning to be done over the next 30, 40 years. The other aspect of this is, okay, we've gotten to the point of retirement and we understand, what you want to do from a day-to-day, maybe what you want to do over the next 20 to 30 years. What are the challenges that you're going to face along the way? We know there's going to be market volatility. We know there's going to be inflation. There's going to be healthcare costs. So how do we incorporate this all into your financial plan? One thing I'll add on to this, I just want to give you a statistic, is that, when we ask clients, what do you want to do in retirement, what their number one answer is. And the number one answer is usually travel. On average, the usual retiree travels about 2 to 3 weeks out of the year. So you've got to now think, okay, there's 52 weeks in the year. How are you going to spend your time the other 49 to 50 weeks of the year? So this really is a big key, is understanding what you want to do in retirement and making sure that you are creating purpose in your life as you head into this next stage. So we created this acronym, PUSH. It's not about what you are just retiring from, but knowing what you are retiring to and making the most out of your retirement years. So what we tell our clients is, create a purpose. What is your reason for getting up every morning? Create a weekly schedule of things that you're going to do. Start putting time on the calendar of things that you want to get done. What do you want to do? Are you going to do some contracting? Are you wanting to volunteer? Are there events and activities that you see yourself doing? Are you someone that likes to go to concerts, right? What are upcoming activities in the area that you live in that you want to participate in? And that kind of leads into socializing. So how are you going to spend time with family and friends? Kind of in that beginning time period of retirement, what we find from age 60 to 75, those are your go-go years where you're on the run a little bit more highly active. So that's going to be more of your time to socialize. Then when you get into the 75 to 85 years, then we start prioritizing health and fostering, more healthy behaviors because you may not be active. Some more health issues may be arising. How do we look at each stage in retirement through these different lenses and what's maybe going to be a priority to you in retirement? The second key is going to be creating and tracking your expenses and just creating a budget. Step one on this is going to be distinguishing between essential and discretionary expenses. Why this is so important in retirement is that you are going to go from getting paid by your employer. Now you are going to be the one that's going to have to recreate your own paycheck in retirement. So step one, very important. Distinguish between the essential and discretionary expenses. So that way, if we know what is essential, your mortgage payment, your utilities, phone bill, you name it, those fixed monthly payments that we know, that's how much we will need to cover those month-to-month expenses in terms of recreating your paycheck. And then knowing what your discretionary expenses are allows us to kind of see where there is some buffer within your retirement plan. The discretionary expenses are going to be all the fun items like buying a new car or shopping or annual travel, maybe even gifting to loved ones. So these are generally really important, whether it's in years of good market or especially down market, to understand where we can spend more in good years and maybe where we need to retract our spending when the market's being a little bit more volatile. Step two is going to be conducting a comprehensive review of all your debts. So we just want to have an understanding of what good debts may be and what your bad debts are. So, let's take a look. Let's go through the balance sheet and have an understanding, okay, with your debt, what do we have? Mortgage debt? Do we have credit card debt? Is there personal debt out there? Are you holding on to any Parent Plus loans from kids going off to college? And just, if we need to create a plan to get rid of those debts prior to retirement, this is where we're really going to need to start doing some planning around some of those debts. Step three is factoring in inflation to protect purchasing power. Something that's been extremely prevalent over the past few years is seeing what inflation has done. So what we'll actually do as we're going through the financial planning process with folks is add in inflation, because what you'll find is different items and different expenses are going to have various inflationary rates tied to them. So we know medical expenses may have a higher inflation rate than what your phone bill might be growing by. So if we run someone's financial plan factoring no inflation in, your financial plan may look fantastic. We had a client that came to us and said to me, Kevin, I know I'm going to spend X amount every month for the rest of my life, and that's all I'm going to need. So I don't want you to factor in any inflation. I'm like, hey, well, in a perfect world, that may work. However, what we have found is, that fixed number may work for the first 5 to 6 years of retirement, but at some point, clients are going to come back to us and say, hey, things have gotten so expensive. I think I need X amount more. So that's why we want to factor in inflation into the plan early to make it as conservative as possible. And then step 4 is reviewing cash flow to ensure you have enough. When we're going through the financial plan, we'll go through a detailed cash flow analysis to give you an idea of your inflows versus your outflows, both now and into retirement. And at the bottom here, it says we can help. So utilize our comprehensive budget tool. We've got a very, very good budget tool here. So if you want a copy of this, just mention it in the chat below. Just type in budget tool. And what we'll do is we'll send you a copy of this here that you can work through and start building out your own budget. Now, the biggest expense in retirement is generally going to be your health care. So what I want to review with you is what your healthcare options are going to be after you retire from SLB. What I'm going to mention here is your coverage post SLB is going to be highly dependent on your continuous years of service. And then there's going to be various plan structures for those that have US versus international. So what you're going to want to do more than anything to get an accurate idea of what your premium costs are going to be is talk to the SLB Benefit Center and the Alumni Service to get the costs and coverages. But to give you just a high level overview of what it's going to look like is if you retire before 65, your medical coverage is going to act very similar to what you're currently on while you're with SLB. So it's going to be a group health plan offered through Cigna. The difference is that it's going to be much less of an active employee subsidy. The employee is going to be picking up a lot more of the cost. It's almost going to be like you picking up SLB's portion of the monthly cost of your medical. And then they do have a post 65 plan that acts as a Medicare supplement. We've talked to folks and asked them, hey, you're 65, 66, are you going to get on Medicare? And they say, no, my employer's going to take care of that. Well, in a way, yes, but everyone actually needs to enroll in Medicare Part A, which is hospital, and Medicare Part B, which is medical. Now, Part A, you've already paid into that. So that Medicare tax that you've been paying over your career, that goes towards Medicare Part A. So while it's free in retirement, it's not necessarily free because you've put the money into it over your lifetime and through your earnings. Medicare Part B, that is where you're going to be paying for Medicare premiums, and that's going to be more of your routine doctor visits. Where SLB's post-65 plan comes in is it acts as a Medicare supplement. It's going to fill that Medicare Part C and Part D coverage. Now, one thing is based on your coverage, we'll want to determine whether it's going to be better to use SLB's supplement for the drug coverage, or if it's going to be more cost efficient to you to utilize Medicare Part D. So when we're looking at this, we've got Part A and Part B. So as I mentioned, Part A is going to be covering hospital stays and inpatient care. Part B then pays for doctor's visits and outpatient care. So Part C and D, that is where SLB is going to fill that gap. That's going to look like your dental insurance, your vision insurance, your prescription drug coverage. So that's where that Medicare supplement is going to act. Now, what we'll do is we will run an analysis alongside you just to confirm that your SLB coverage is going to be more beneficial for you than actually going out into the market and getting the Part C or D coverage. We've partnered with a company called Carry Loop, where they will provide at no extra cost to our clients a complimentary analysis on essentially all of your healthcare needs, especially around Medicare, to give you the best determination as to what is your best option with the Medicare benefits that are offered to you. So we're going to now move into the third key, which is going to be reviewing your retirement income sources. We illustrate this through a three-legged stool. So you've got retirement as the seat of the stool. You've got the legs as your pension, Social Security, and your savings, which could include 401k, your discounted stock purchase plan, other retirement assets. But the reason we illustrate this through a stool is they need to work harmoniously. If one leg of a stool was too long or too short, then you just get this stool that is wobbling all over the place or could even tip over, right? So what we want is a perfect three-legged stool where all aspects are working very well together. So we look at that through an income component, a tax component, and an investment component. So the first part that we're going to be looking at here on this stool is going to be your Social Security. Now, I know people are going to have a lot of questions around Social Security and, when should I take it? When's the best time to take it? And unfortunately, the answer is going to be, it depends, but it's the most truthful answer because it's going to depend on your personal situation. What I can tell you is that based on if your full retirement age is at 67, you would receive 100% of your benefit. Every year that you delay it, you get about an 8% increase in your benefit. And then each year that you decide to take it early, you get about a 6 to 7% decrease. When we're talking with clients, really what this is going to be based on is the longevity in your family. Like, do you have history of family living a long and healthy life? And do you guys have an income need right now? If you need the income to supplement your financial plan, we may be looking at taking Social Security early. If you don't need the income and your family history shows people living to 90 to 100 years old, we may be recommending that you take it at 70. So what I'd encourage is to walk through the financial plan with us. If this is something that you have, many questions on, allow us to do a complimentary Social Security analysis on this so that we can give you the best information that we can around your personal situation. Now, one thing I do want to harp on here is what we find is a lot of clients nowadays are retiring early, say anywhere from age 55 to age 60. But what they do is they'll take a couple years off of work and they may go back and say, hey, I want to contract, and that's not abnormal. A lot of you have spent 30, 40 years working and crafting an expertise in a certain field. And after a couple years, you feel like you've still got some more gas in the tank to give to that expertise that you've cultivated over the years. If you retire at age 60 and you start pulling Social Security at age 62, well, if you start contracting at age 64 while you're on Social Security Administration is going to start penalizing you. So what does that look like? They would deduct $1 for every $2 that you earn above $24,480, and that's of 2026. If you earn over $25,000, they're going to start taking money from you. Now, if you get over $65,000 in earnings, then they're going to start pulling $1 for every $3 that you earn as well. So if you know you're going to go back to work at some point before your full retirement age, it's going to be beneficial for you to delay Social Security so you're not receiving that penalty. This is just going to look at a linear break even on your Social Security benefits. You've got the light blue line, age 62, total benefit at the end is $752,000. You've got the dark blue line, which would be taking Social Security at age 67, gets you about 921. And then age 70, the green line at 952. So this is just showing break evens and what you would expect to receive from Social Security if you were to live until age 90. Now, what this doesn't assume is reinvesting your Social Security earnings. This is just showing a true break even on your benefit as to what the total lifetime earnings would be. So if you're looking at this, your break even between taking age 62 and 67 is about age 79 to 80. Your break even between 67 and 70 is about 83. This is just a straight line progression, as I mentioned. What we'd want to do is dig deeper on your personal situation and give you a real true analysis as to what's going to be your best option for Social Security. Now I'm going to move into more SLB specific items. So we're going to discuss the SLB discounted stock purchase plan. This is a really great tool for SLB folks. I know many people that I talk to at SLB are utilizing this, but I kind of just want to walk through how the plan works, how it's taxed, and kind of how the purchase periods work for this. The SLB discounted stock purchase plan is offered through Fidelity. What you can do is you can contribute about 1 to 10% of your salary up to a $25,000 max. Now, since you're buying the SLB stock at a 15% discount, your maximum is really shakes out to about $21,250 in stock. So basically it's saying, hey, you're buying $25,000 worth of stock at a 15% discount. So the most that you can put into it in a year is $21,250. What the purchase periods look like. So when are the offerings? So there's 2 purchase periods per year. You've got the period of January 1st through June 30th, so the first half of the year, and you've got July 1st through December 31st. What SLB is going to do, so we'll take the January 1 and June 30th periods, is they're going to say, all right, what was SLB stock on Jan 1 and what was SLB stock on June 30th? And whichever of those periods has the lower price, take this year, for example, price is going to be lower on Jan 1 than it is on June 30th. So what you'll get is to purchase the stock based on Jan 1's stock price plus a 15% discount of that stock price. It's a really beneficial offering that SLB gives to their employees. And what I like about it is that it gives you an opportunity for immediate liquidity to where if you needed funds, you could sell stock and have a little bit of liquidity for near-term expenses, or you can hold SLB stock and you can hold it for upside. Many people that I talk to, they do a little bit of mixture of both because they don't want all of their eggs in one basket. How the taxation of that works. So if you were to sell the stock immediately, it's just going to be treated as ordinary income tax. Or if you were to sell it within the year, it's treated as ordinary income tax. If you held it for over a year, the gains on the stock are going to be treated as capital gains. And then that 15% discount on the stock is automatically treated as ordinary income tax as well. Moving on to another part of the stool is going to be SLB's pension plan. Now, one thing I want to preface with this is I've met with hundreds of SLB folks. I don't know if I've met 2 people with the exact same benefits across the company. So what I'd encourage you to do, if you haven't, is go into the BACO system and start getting an idea of what your various pension schemes are and what are the benefits that you have within those schemes. So I've kind of outlined here multiple pension schemes and when you can start pulling these pension plans. So if you look here, if you have the pre-2010 ISPP benefits, you could hypothetically start pulling those at age 55. You can only take that one as an annuity. If you look at the ISPS, you have the option to either take that as a lump sum, which you can roll into an IRA and defer the taxes on, or you can take it as an annuity. You've got the post-2010 ISPP benefits is going to act similar to the pre-2010s, which is going to be an annuity. And then you got the U.S. pension plan as well. So if you look, this is how Baco illustrates it. You got the pre-2010 and the ISPS that you can take at 55. Now that'd be dependent on retiring at 55. You got the post-2010 benefits that you can take starting at 60, and then you got the U.S. plan at 65. What I'd encourage you to do, as I mentioned, is go see what schemes you have. And then what we'd want to do is run the financial plan for you and start building this out. Because you can tweak these a little bit. You don't have to take them at 55, right at 60. I mean, you can delay some of these benefits based on when you are going to retire, and the numbers will change with that. Based on your unique situation, we're going to want to take a look at what you've got and determine when is going to be the most optimal time for you to pull your pension. Now, going to some of these pension options, so you can take them as single life pensions, or you can take them as 100 or 50% joint and survivor annuities. If you take it as a single life, that's going to be the highest monthly income option. But as soon as you pass, the pensions are gone. So if you're married and your spouse is younger than you, there's no survivor benefit. Even if your spouse is older than you, there's no survivor benefit. A lot of times if you're married, you want to guarantee income for your spouse, and that's what the 100% or 50% joint and survivor options do. This next slide is going to give you a lookout at what that is like. So we're using John and Jane Doe as an example. The single life annuity is going to pay John $3,000 a month. The payment stop when John dies. So if he dies at 75, they've only received $540,000 and Jane doesn't get anything. If John dies at 80, they get $720,000, and if John dies at 85, they've received $900,000. You're rolling the dice to live a long, healthy life, especially if you have a spouse, if you're not guaranteeing them benefits. If you're single, obviously the single life annuity is going to be the best and only option for you. 50% joint survivor. So what does that look like? So the monthly while John is alive is going to be $2,700. If John passes, that would mean that Jane would receive $1,350 per month for the rest of her life. This is guaranteeing some income for the spouse. Now, if you have plenty of other retirement savings and you're not reliant on the pension income, the 50% joint survivor may be a good option. But if we're reliant on the pension income to source a majority of our retirement income, and you need to guarantee that for your spouse, the 100% joint survivors most likely going to be the best option, because John's going to receive $2,500 per month as long as he lives, and then if he passes, Jane's going to receive $2,500 a month for the rest of her life as well. Now we're going to move on to your retirement savings. So this is that third part of the stool. This is going to discuss the various savings vehicles that you can be utilizing while you're still working. So everyone here probably knows about the 401k and the Roth 401k that you have available to you. So I'm going to talk about all four of these items and kind of how they work, and then how the taxes on them are when it comes time to distribute these assets for retirement income. Now, what your traditional 401k, your pre-tax 401k, it goes in tax deductible. So it goes in pre-tax and you get a tax deduction on it. And then in retirement, when you distribute that asset, it is going to be treated as ordinary income tax to you. So you've deferred the income on that your entire career. Then as soon as you start withdrawing those funds, you're going to get taxed on it similarly to how you would your salary. Your Roth 401k. that money goes in after tax. So you're paying the tax on that right now. And then in retirement, when you pull those funds out, you receive those tax-free. Your brokerage account, that is outside of what Schlumberger offers, but it's similar somewhat to the discounted stock purchase plan. This would be a vehicle that you use after tax funds, so money that is in your checking or savings account that you plug into a brokerage account, invest it, and when you sell that stock, it is treated as capital gains tax. Now, depending on the amount of income that you make in a year, your capital gains tax could be anywhere from 15 to 23.8%. So back to the HSA, this is actually, we consider the most powerful investment vehicle that you have offered to you. Now, the only way to be eligible for the HSA is to be on a high deductible health plan offered to you through SLB. Why the HSA is so powerful, it is the only triple tax advantage investment vehicle. So it goes in pre-tax. So you're getting a tax deduction on those funds similar to the traditional 401k when you put the money in. The funds grow tax-free, so you can invest the funds in the HSA, and then in retirement, you can pull it out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. One recommendation we make for clients is don't use your HSA while you're working. If you're able to cash flow your medical expense in retirement, do it. We want to use the HSA as an investment. So if we can create this investment pool for qualified medical expenses, it's going to be extremely powerful in retirement. Because imagine you have any surgeries or prescription drug costs or routine doctor's visits, dentist visits, you name it, right? If we have this dedicated bucket of money that we can pull from tax-free to cover your medical expenses, you're going to be that much better off into retirement. So if we can, we try not to touch the HSA while working. We try to max it out and invest it for some long-term growth. I'm just going to cover some of the contribution limits for this year. There's some important nuances that have taken place under the Secure 2.0 Act. So as of right now, everyone, whether you're under age 50 or over age 50, you can contribute $24,500 to your 401k. If you're over the age of 50, you can contribute an extra $8,000. So that is your catch-up contribution. And then under the Secure 2.0 Act, they created a super catch-up. If you're between the age 60 and 63, your catch-up goes from $8,000 to $11,250. So overall, the maximum you can put into a defined contribution plan, which is a 401k, is $72,000 if you're under the age of 50, $80,000 if you're over 50, and $83,250 if you're between the ages of 60 and 63. That's important because I'm going to cover this in a slide that's coming up as to how to really maximize your 401k as an SLB employee. One important aspect that you see here at the bottom is regarding the catch-up contributions. If your prior wages exceeded $150,000, your catch-up contributions are going to be made to your after-tax Roth. If you make over $150,000, that $8,000 or $11,250 is now going into your Roth, which means it's not going in pre-tax and you're not getting the tax deduction on those contributions. Quickly, just go look at the HSA. Your contributions as an individual are $4,400, $8,750 as a family, and at 55 plus, you get an extra $1,000 in a catch-up contribution. So your 401k through SLB will match you up to 10%. So what does that look like? So on the first 6% that you contribute, SLB is going to match that 100%. The next 4%, they're going to match you essentially 50% on those. So if you put 10% in, they're going to match you another 2%. And then they have a company retirement contribution of 2%. So simply, the way it works is if you put 10% in, SLB is going to put 10% in to your 401k plan. Now, one thing you guys do have the option of is after age 59 and a half, you're allowed to do what's called an in-service rollover. You can move your 401k into an IRA, which is going to give you access to more investments that are offered than the Alight 401k plan. And it could give you access to financial planning and just professional management to test out an advisor. I think one thing that we do with clients is we call it dating before marriage, and it's really testing out an advisor, because last thing you want to do is, say you're 2 months from retirement and you're just figuring all this out, and now you're deciding who you should move all of your retirement savings to. What we want to do is say, hey, test us out, let us help you manage maybe a smaller portion of your retirement savings now. Allow us to work with you as you're approaching retirement, whether you're 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out. Let us start working with you around the retirement planning, the financial planning, earn your trust. So that's just a much easier transition for you in terms of trusting your advisor when you do hit the eject button and transition into retirement. So this is your 401k plan. Here, the example here is on a $200,000 salary. To make this simple, this on the left is if you're under 50, and this on the right is if you're over 50. Now, this would be how to maximize your 401k on an annual basis. So we're going to look at over 50 with a defined contribution 401k plan. If you're over 50, you can contribute $80,000 to your 401k. How do we do that? So $24,500 of that is going to come from your deferrals into the 401k plan. Another $8,000 of those is going to come from catch-up contributions. Under the scenario of a $200,000 salary where SLB matches 10%, they're going to provide us $20,000 in company matching contributions. That gets us to about $52,500 in contributions. So we'll ask ourselves, well, how do we get to $80,000 then? Well, we can utilize what's called after-tax contributions. So these are additional contributions that we can make to the 401k that SLB offers. So you've got your pre-tax traditional bucket, you've got the Roth bucket, then you've got this after-tax bucket. And this is where we get a lot of questions here, because people tend to think that the after-tax and the Roth bucket are the same when they're not. So you can make, based on this scenario, additional $27,500 into the after-tax bucket. Now, where the after-tax bucket and the Roth bucket differ is any contributions to the Roth bucket grow tax-free, where any contributions to the after-tax bucket, they grow tax deferred, or what you could call taxable. So I'm going to go back to this slide here and say, here's your after-tax contribution. And then what we're showing here is here's tax deferred growth. So say if you accumulated $50,000 in this after-tax bucket, and those were only your contributions, say if it grew to $100,000 total and $50,000 were your contributions. If you look at the light blue, that after-tax contribution, you could move to a Roth IRA, but the growth would have to go to a traditional IRA because it's taxable. So what we'd want to ensure and how we'd want to start planning around this, we'd want to be purposeful with these contributions, and we'd want to create a system to allow all of these after-tax contributions to grow tax-free. We don't want to put ourselves in another situation where we've allowed after-tax contributions to grow, over a long period of time to where they're now taxable. We create a system with our clients to purposefully contribute to this after-tax bucket, and then to move it over to a Roth IRA on an annual basis. Because what that allows us to do is to maximize your 401k. But then by moving the after-tax contributions into a Roth, you're allowing those funds to grow tax-free for the remainder of your lifetime. If you have questions about this, or you're thinking that you may have after-tax contributions in your 401k, or even if you're saying, hey, this is interesting to me, I want to see, if this is something that I can pursue, let's chat. I'd be happy to discuss, what's going to be the best possible way to start maximizing your 401k plan. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and this is something that's especially important as you're getting closer to retirement, is the investments within your 401k plan. The amount of people that we've talked to, and when we ask them, hey, how did you choose your investment allocations within your plan? And they say, well, I looked at the top performing investment that was offered, and I looked at last year's returns, and that's how I made my decision. And that's what we want to avoid, especially as we get closer to retirement. I think what we want to look at is how can we structure your portfolio for success while also reducing some volatility and try to hedge some risk along the way. If you came to me and said, hey, I chose my allocation based on what performed best last year, well, I can show you many cases on this chart here, and we call this the periodic table of investments. But I can show you on this chart where that may have been a fault. Let's look at 2017 in the middle. So in 2017, emerging markets performed extremely well. So in 2018, you said, hey, I'm going to go all in on emerging markets because it did almost 40% last year. Well, if you did that January 1 of 2018, your portfolio would be down almost 15% because in emerging markets was one of the worst performing assets. Now, 2018 wasn't a great year in the market. You see cash was the top performing asset at 1.8%. Now, if you take that at the end of the year, like, oh my goodness, cash is performing the best. I just need to sell everything. I'm just going to hold on to cash. Well, if you look in 2019, cash was the worst performing asset at 2.2%. And there was obviously a market recovery in that year. So large cap stocks performed the best at 31.5%. So you would have missed a really large swing in the market. There's multiple cases of this along the way. You see 2021, REITs were the highest performing, and then in 22 it was the worst, and commodities were the highest in 2022, with then being the worst in 2023. So what we don't want to do is base our future investments off last year's performance. If you see here, this asset allocation that is running throughout the plan is a structured portfolio that takes all of these assets that you see here and creates a asset allocation across all of them. And if you look at what it does, it's never the worst performing, but it's also never the best. If we're looking at the volatility, it is the fourth least volatile asset while also being the fourth highest returning asset over time. So what you get here is just something that is not going to be as risky for someone getting closer to retirement, but going to provide more steady returns. I think what we look at for our clients is, when you get to this point in retirement and you've created this nest egg, we don't necessarily need to hit home runs at this point, because when you try to hit home runs, there's a higher chance of striking out than there is of actually hitting a home run. What we want to be able to do is consistently hit singles and doubles for our clients without the risk of striking out. We talked about these various income sources or various retirement assets that you may have. So you've got your pension plan, you've got Social Security, you've got your 401k investments. Now we just need to check, is there a gap? Is there anything that's missing in our plan at this point? So the fourth key, and that ties in with it, is calculating your retirement readiness score. So this is where we would go in and find what are the gaps in your plan. The financial planning exercise that we walk folks through, it will generate utilizing a Monte Carlo analysis. And I'm sure there's a lot of engineers on here that are familiar with Monte Carlo analysis. But we're going to run this plan, and the design is to give you a probability of success, to give you an understanding of, is your retirement going to be successful, and understanding what your score means, and are there trade-offs that we need to consider. So looking from right to left here on the probability of successes, if you're in the 0 to 70%, that's the danger range that we probably need to make some major trade-offs and think about what do we need to do to get you to a comfortable place to retire. 71 to 82% means, hey, we're close. Your plan is probably a little sensitive. Some subtle tweaks are going to be what we need to ensure that you've got a plan that's going to last the long run. 83 to 95 is our sweet spot in terms of having plan success. And then 96 to 100 is what we consider actually overfunded. I've got many clients that, engineers, they want to see that 100% score. But at the end of the day, this isn't a math test. This is your life. So 100% tells me, when we go back to what are the things you want to do, what are some of your goals, 100% says, hey, maybe we're leaving some money on the table here, unless we've got very strong inheritance goals that we're wanting to leave for kids. You've worked 30, 40 years of your career to get this point. So 100% tell me we're leaving some on the table where we can go out and knock out some bucket list items that you guys are wanting to achieve in your lifetime. All right, here's a little example on this screen, though. We can run as many scenarios as people want to see. This is a client here, and the current situation for the probability of success was 67%. You see their income and expenses were running about $240,000 a year in terms of current expenses, and then living expenses and retirement at the bottom was $200,000. Now, this is where we started walking through the different trade-offs that this client had. So we said to her, hey, if you want to retire at age 60, there's some different levers we can pull. We can be a little bit more aggressive with our investments. Probably not something you want to do as a retiree. We could reduce living expenses for a few years, see what that looks like. They had a secondary home. I said we could sell the home and use the cash proceeds to invest. That'll create liquidity. Just going through all these various options, the client made it clear, hey, I want to spend $200,000 a year. I don't want to sell the secondary home, but they were willing to say, hey, don't mind my job. I would hold on for a few more years. So if you look at the plan on the right, we changed the retirement age to 65. And what that did was the plan is now showing an 84%. We've got these various levers that we can pull to ensure that your plan is going to be successful. And I encourage you to walk through the financial plan. This is a complementary process where we can start understanding what your score is and some of these trade-offs. Now, the last key is going to be creating a withdrawal strategy. So based on your various income sources and your assets, we're going to need to create a withdrawal strategy to make sure you're getting the income you need for retirement. Maybe most everyone here has heard of the 4% rule of initial withdrawals on retirement portfolios. Now, this was an experiment ran by a professor at University of Chicago, and they took a client's portfolio and they withdrew 4% of the assets each year and gave the assets a return of 3% per year. And this provided a score of 100% on a Monte Carlo basis. And as I mentioned, we aren't looking for 100%. So while it is a good rule of thumb, what we look at is more of a dynamic spending strategy. So we want to adjust withdrawals based on market performance and how to keep your lifestyle and to preserve your wealth. So what we talk about with our clients is say, hey, in good years, maybe we can knock off some of the bucket list items that you guys are wanting to achieve. And this kind of goes back to that creating a budget, is having an understanding of what your fixed versus discretionary expenses are. Because if the market's been doing well, hey, let's lean into those discretionary expenses and some of the stuff that we want to do on the goal side. If the market's not doing well, hey, we know exactly where we need to cut in terms of our expenses and be able to ride it out and wait for the market to recover. And this kind of brings me into, okay, so we have this dynamic spending strategy, but then what is this bucket strategy? And what that's going to do is it's going to divide the portfolio into categories based on time horizons to give clients comfort into how their funds are invested. It's really a time-based segmentation. The purpose is to give you a buffer around whatever the market's doing. The first bucket's basically your short-term bucket. It's going to be 3 years worth of living expenses. Within there, you're going to have, cash, treasuries, short-term securities. That's going to be covering your near-term expenses. Bucket 2, you're going to have a more balanced portfolio of stocks to bonds. Stocks may be more value-based, more dividend-based to produce income. That intermediate term is definitely going to be a more income-producing portfolio. And then the long-term bucket, 15 plus years, is going to be heavy growth strategies in public and or private markets. So looking at growth stocks or opportunities and maybe alternative market spaces to really allow that portfolio to grow. Having the understanding of I've always got 1 to 3 years worth of cushion for unexpected expenses or for a market downturn. So I know that I don't need to sell my stocks to get me through a market downturn. That's the last thing we want to do. So we know, hey, if the market's down, I can use my 3 years worth of cash to buy through this market downturn to allow my portfolio to recover. So we do a lot of this for our clients and creating this strategy to give them peace of mind that they have a portfolio that's built for them to withstand any volatility that we're going to see. So this is the IRA distribution timeline. So this kind of goes with your withdrawals. A lot of folks that we find at SLB, outside of the pension and Social Security, it's primarily 401k, which is going to be pre-tax IRA assets. So this gives you an idea of how your distribution timeline works. So while you're employed, your federal taxes were controlled by your earnings, what you brought in. When you get to retirement, your taxes are going to be controlled by how much your distributions are in retirement. And then by the time you get to RMD age, which is for folks before age 1960, that were born before 1960, it's going to be age 73. If you're born after 1960, your required minimum distributions are going to be starting at 75. You're going to have this window from when you retire to 75 to do some tax planning, because in this window where your taxes are controlled by your distributions, that's the first time in your life where you're really going to be in control of how much tax that you take. So we want to be very purposeful and strategic during that time period. We get a lot of questions about Roth conversions during this time period. If you're in a situation where, you're saying, hey, I've got this large IRA 401k, it's all pre-tax, I'm going to defer it as long as I can, and you're in the 10 to 12% tax bracket in retirement, if you defer a large 401k asset, once you have to start taking required minimum distributions on that, that could punch you into the 24 to 32% tax bracket later in your years at 73, 75. So if you retire, what we'd be encouraging you to do is actually accelerating income in those early years. Your earnings are controlled by your distributions. Well, if you're in the 10 to 12% bracket, or even in the 22, let's start filling up some brackets and try converting as much money as we can. Now, this is a hot topic right now, and it may or may not make sense to do Roth conversions for everyone. So if you do have conversion questions, reach out to us or type into the chat that you've got questions about conversions, and we can set up and walk through the plan. I can show you, hey, is it going to make sense for you personally in your situation whether or not to do Roth conversions? So we've got a complimentary 3-step process here. So we've gone through the 5 keys to retirement readiness for SLB folks. Now this is more, if I mentioned as to what our approach is. This is a 3-meeting process, so generally about a 20 to 30-minute call where we get to know you a little bit more, understand your goals, do a little bit more of a data collection, get some of the more financial information. So in meeting 2, this will be a longer, about hour and a half long meeting. We're using the information you've provided us and then refining it a little bit more. We can go through that financial planning exercise with you. We can run some scenario analysis, Roth conversion analysis, and answer the question as well of, hey, are you on the right track for retirement. And then we can provide some innovative planning, tax planning, estate planning strategies that may be pertinent to you and your situation. And then 3 would be a personalized implementation. So we may discover some ways that we may be able to work with you and help you out, or just assign some immediate next steps for tax strategies and investments that are going to be useful for you while you're still working at SLB and through retirement. So it's a complimentary 3-step process that we'd be happy to walk through with all of you. And if you're interested in doing so, here's a QR code. Feel free to scan this here. I'm going to leave it up here for a second, but you can book a no cost, no obligation consultation where we will go through that 3-step process with you. Now, I am the lead advisor on our team that works with SLB, so I'll most likely be reaching out to you if you scan the QR code. If you prefer just writing in the chat that you want to meet, just type in there and we will reach out to you to schedule some time here in the next couple of weeks. Now, again, I am Kevin Wilson. I am advisor on our team that works a lot of SLB folks. This has been a pleasure talking with you all today. I know I've ran over a bit, so if you have any additional questions, I'm going to leave this open. Please feel free to put all your questions into the chat at this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure we get to each and every single one of you regarding your questions, and I'll be reaching out to you via email to make sure that we get those questions answered. So appreciate you joining us today, and we will be in contact with you soon if you had any questions or if you're wanting to schedule some time to meet. Thank you, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week.